like this that I would never find on my own. I am so curious to see if this is even remotely realistic. Let's get into it.
Ookla Airport. This is the main airport that you would take if you were going to be visiting Mount Everest. The airport is nestled between two mountains, and the runway is extremely short. Because of the elevation, the plane cannot get any lights and very little electrical power. Also, there are no air traffic controllers, therefore it is up to the pilot to safely touch down and land the plane on their own.
It's up to the pilot to safely land the plane on their own?
Also, there are no air traffic controllers, therefore it is up to the pilot to safely touch down and land the plane on their own.
Clearly I've been doing it wrong this whole time. Apparently air traffic control is actually supposed to land the plane and I'm just supposed to be up there to, I don't know, push some buttons? This is a very specialized airport, meaning random pilots aren't going to be coming here doing touch and goes at a place like this. So you're only going to have specialized pilots who are going to be very familiar with the area, and so having air traffic control is not really necessary in this case. There's going to be a frequency that these pilots are all going to be communicating on, and so everyone's going to know and have kind of a layout or a pattern of the way in and the way out, and they're going to be coordinating. And the amount of traffic there, I can't imagine is that busy to require air traffic control. But this part had me really confused.
Because of the elevation, the plane cannot get any lights and very little electrical power.
So I'm assuming that they're meaning the airport can't have lights and power, not the plane, because the plane can fly at that altitude fine and it doesn't need to be hooked up anywhere to get ground power or electricity. It's able to generate its own electricity with the engine. So I'm guessing they're meaning the airport. But here's something to keep in mind. An airport like this doesn't really need lights. Planes aren't going to be flying in there in the middle of night. So you're only probably going to have a day approach and in clear skies, or relatively clear at least. You're not going to have planes coming in there at nighttime because of the mountainous area. You're not going to have something like that in a place like this. This airport is dangerous, but for none of the reasons what they mentioned. It is a relatively short runway. It's only 1,700 feet long, and I didn't know that. I had to look that up. But it's only 1,700 feet long, which is very short. I would say your typical short airport that you might see would be 3,000, maybe 4,000. That's going to be your short airport. That's not something that I will fly my plane into, but you will see that. And I've landed at runways that are that short. That would be a typical short runway, so it's half that size. So for that reason, there's some danger, and it's also at a very steep slope. Pilots are used to landing on a flat place. The runway can be flat, and in my experience, where there's been humped runways, you'll see some that have a big bump or a slight grade. Sometimes the pilots will slam it in because they're not used to landing on something that's not flat. Obviously, there's going to be special training for these pilots to get into this place, so there isn't going to be the same problem as you would have as, let's say, me, an airline pilot used to landing on a flat surface. If you put me on this runway, it'd probably be a straight up hot mess. But the pilots that are flying this are going to get special training before they go there. Another reason an airport like this is dangerous is I'm guessing that there's very limited go-around procedures. Typically, when a pilot messes up an approach to get onto a specific runway, they're able to do a go-around and come back around again. I think this is backed up to a mountain, so you'd have to make the decision to go around pretty early on. It's not like you can have a bad landing and just, oh, it's okay, we'll just go around and try it again. I think there is probably a procedure for that, but it's not going to be a typical one that you're going to see at an airport. And the third reason that a place like this is going to be dangerous is that the weather en route going in through the mountains like that can change quickly. So you might be en route to a place like that. There's not going to be any radar coverage from air traffic control to help you get around those mountains, and a plane of this size is going to struggle getting above huge mountains like you see here. So if you're en route and you get a bunch of weather that moves in on the airport, you're gonna have to get out quickly because you get stuck in the weather in a mountain valley like that. It is super dangerous. Another risk for an airport like this is the altitude. It's a very high airport. I think it's around 10,000 feet. I've flown into airports over 8,000 feet, and so for us, there's a lot of other things that we have to consider when you're going into a high altitude airport like that. So for that reason, it's also a dangerous airport. But for almost none of the reasons that they mentioned is that airport really dangerous.
Courchevel Airport. This French airport is built into the Alps. When the pilot is ready to land, he must fly through a narrow valley for his descent. The runway is also very short. It is the shortest runway of any airport in the world. The runway is just 0.3 miles long. If the pilot is not able to get up enough speed to take off, they will fly right onto the cliff and hope that the plane stays in the air. Another reason that takeoff is so difficult is that the runway has a downward slope of about 18.5%. Most pilots avoid using this airport at all costs.
Shortest runway in the world?
It is the shortest runway of any airport in the world.
What about the one you just talked about? It's shorter. The reason I know that is because I had just looked it up. The airport we just talked about is actually about 30 feet shorter. And for those of you that don't use feet, it's 10 meters. About 10 meters shorter than the previous airport. So it's kind of strange. They just said it's the shortest in the world, but they just literally talked about a shorter runway right before this. Still, it is a very short runway. Now, a plane does need a certain amount of speed to get ready for takeoff. Having this very steep downward slope of, I think they said 18 degrees, is only going to help you gain speed though. And then the part about going off the cliff and hoping your plane stays in flight, let's just say, if your plane did go off the cliff and you were going too slow to take off, the plane is going to pick up speed, assuming you don't hit trees or rocks as you go off that cliff. You're going to plane to pick up speed and be able to fly away fine. So that doesn't really make any sense. That's not something that would be bad. If you said, if you went off this edge of the cliff and into a pile of rocks, that's a problem. But not going off the cliff and just flying away, that would just pick up speed and you'd be flying. Not really a big deal. They may be confusing cars with planes. Having a heavily sloped runway makes it a challenge for either landing and takeoff, because it's not the way that we were taught how to land or how to take off. But this part,
most pilots avoid using this airport at all costs.
that makes no sense at all. The pilots aren't going to be planning to go to a certain place and go, oh, that airport's closed, where should we go? Oh, let's go to this very difficult